What's going on, my fishing bros and broettes? I hope you are catching a bunch of bass or any kind of fish that pulls on your rod and reel, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. We are going into the holiday season, Christmas, Thanksgiving, buy yourself a present season. And you know, I don't know about you, but this time of year, I do as much fishing as I normally do. However, I also kind of step back and reflect on what rod and reel setups I have going into spring, going into winter, and kind of do a little inventory to kind of get comfortable and figure out, am I being as efficient, I guess, as I can be with the rod and reel setups that I have. So it kind of came across as an idea to me. Maybe I should talk to you guys a little bit about 3 rod and reel setups that for a lot of guys, you know, that's all we're really taking on when we go on our buddy's boat. Maybe if we go bank fishing, even sometimes when we're going out on our own boats or kayak fishing, any of those kinds of fishing, you know, limiting and kind of having a smaller amount of things to take out is sometimes helpful. It makes the process a lot easier for us. So I'm going to tell you 3 rod and reel setups that I think are integral to any kind of bass fishing that you want to do. They do almost all of the things, techniques, baits that you want to do, and they can handle just about any size fish, from small little tiny fish, if that's what you got in your pond or lake, to big 9, 10 pound, 12 pound bass, which I've caught with some of these rod and reel setups. So let's get started. Really, a bait caster is probably the most prominent fishing rod and reel setup that you're going to use for bass fishing. There's a lot of spinning applications, but for the most part, a lot of the presentations that we're making, a lot of the techniques that we're using are going to require or be a predominantly better technique to use with a bait caster. So I'm going to start with the most general one that I have, and that is this guy right here. This is a 7.2 medium heavy. This is a Halo KS2, but really the biggest key is it can be any rod brand, but the trick is a medium heavy is probably one of the most workhorse action style rods that there is in bass fishing. And I like a medium heavy. A lot of guys recommend a 7 foot. I have some 7 foots, but if you're looking for something that kind of crosses all boundaries when it comes to lures, going a little bit longer is better in my opinion. Not maybe like a 7.4, 7.6, I think that's a little too long, but 7.1, 7.2, maybe if you're a little bit taller, 7.3. If you're a taller person, usually you use a little bit longer rod just because of your height. You guys know JT Kenny, a good buddy of mine. Basically, all of my setups are pretty close to what JT's are, but they're all like 3 or 4 inches shorter because I'm more than that much shorter. JT is huge, dude. He like towers over you. But a 7.2, 7.1, somewhere in that range. And the reason I like that is it's super versatile. So this rod and reel setup, this is an SLX. This is the 7, I think it's 7.2 gear ratio. So it's a faster but not super fast reel. It's a great all-purpose reel for just about anything. I can throw a chatterbait on this thing. I can throw a swim bait, and whether it's like a 5-inch swim bait with a ½ ounce, you know, maybe goat head on it, I can throw something like a 5-inch swim bait even on a 1/4 ounce. It gives you good castability, good casting distance, and the rod has enough tip so that even in a reaction bite, it'll kind of bend and kind of absorb some of that, and you're not actually pulling the bait away from the fish. What's nice with this too, I can throw a spinnerbait and I can throw my drag baits. A 7.1 or a 7.2 medium heavy is a perfect rod for throwing a jig. Football jig like we use in fall, in spring, pretty much all the times of the year. I can also drag a Texas rig with this, a lighter one for shallower type cover, or even a heavier one. Another great technique that I love doing with this, especially in Florida, is putting like a little stick bait on it, little ace, fat ace with a 3/16, a 1/4 ounce weight, and you can basically throw it around just about anything. But the 7.2 is super versatile because it has enough tip to handle some of your reaction style lures like we talked about, a chatterbait, spinnerbait, even some of your bigger crankbaits, but at the same time you can still sort of drag and have really good sensitivity as long as with a good tip to sort of feel that worm or feel that soft plastic or that dragging style rig that you're using across various types of cover. It also gives you a lot of power in the backbone to fight the fish. However, you have enough tip where you're not pulling the hook so hard, either pulling the hook away from the fish or pulling the bait away from the fish or pulling the hook out of the fish as you're actually fighting the fish. Usually I have this thing rigged up with 15-pound fluorocarbon. 90% of the time that will work. Obviously, there's going to be times when maybe you're fishing around heavier cover, heavier grass, when you're going to want to go up to, say, 17, maybe 20 pound. There's also other times when you might want to go a little bit lighter. I wouldn't go any lighter than, say, 12-pound fluorocarbon on a medium heavy setup. That's probably your bottom baseline range. But super versatile, and if I wanted to, if I'm fishing around super heavy grass, it's very easy to put braid on a rod like this. And once again, coming back to the length, the 7.2, that tip makes it soft enough so that braid is a non-stretch type line, and it can put a lot more tension on the rod. So you want a little softer rod sometimes when you're using braid, but having that little extra length on your medium heavy, once again, that tip is probably one of the most important parts about judging a rod. It has the tip to handle that kind of line and those kinds of situations, but it also provides the backbone to pull fish out of some of that thicker cover. So a 7.172, this is the KS2, this is one of my favorites. An SLX, awesome workhorse reel, and you can do it in various speeds, but I think in general, if you're looking for something that's an all-around sort of functioning reel, that 7-to-1 gear ratio is a solid way to go. Sticking with bait casters, this guy is kind of unique. This is a 7-foot medium action, so basically one step below and a little bit shorter. The reason I really recommend this as sort of one of the rods that you want to have with you all the time is the versatility of the techniques or the baits that you can put on it. What this does is it gives you the option to still use a bait caster, but to present some of your, I guess, lighter sort of techniques or baits. An example is actually what I have on, a little more finesse. This is an underspin. We talked about it in another video. An underspin. A great example would be a jerkbait too. You know, a hard plastic jerkbait like a Vision 110. Things along those lines. These are great options almost any time of the year. Summer, winter, fall, spring. This rod, because it's a medium action, a little bit softer rod, has the tip to be able to not over jerk or overwork that jerk bait, and you can also fight the fish fairly well without actually having them pull off, because oftentimes, you know, you have smaller treble hooks on those jerk baits. You don't really want to put too much tension on the fish, but you need to have enough backbone and able to, you know, fight like a 3 to 4 pound, 3 to 5 pound class fish. The other thing that I can do with this is I can throw my lighter Texas rigs and my more finesse jig setups. So if I have a little 1/4 ounce jig, if I want to throw maybe like a small little craw or creature bait on a lighter, say, Texas rig, like a 1/4 ounce, 1/8 ounce, something along those lines. Another great presentation that I make with this is you can throw swim jigs on this medium heavy, you know, 3/8, a 1/4 even, but your standard style swim jigs. I like to throw a lot of sort of finessier or smaller profile baits, and one thing that I'll do on this is I'll take like a 1/4 ounce wobble head with a little like swimming crawl, like a burner crawl or the Zoom Speed crawl, or even like a burner worm, a swimming style worm, and I'll actually throw this thing and reel it. What's really nice with this is that softer tip allows the rod to load up a lot better when I actually get bit, because it's more of a reaction style bait than, or a reaction style bite than when you're actually dragging the bait through. But it's a super versatile rod, soft plastic jerk bait, even a topwater. If you put braid on this thing, as you guys know, I like to throw my topwaters on braid. If you put braid on this thing, it has a lot of tip, a lot of, not parabolic bend so much, but there's a lot of play in the tip so that you can work that bait correctly, really get it walking or pop it just right without overdoing it. A lot of times I think a lot of guys use a rod that's maybe too stiff for the presentation that they're making, because they think they're either gonna catch a giant fish or they're fishing around what they consider a heavier cover. But what that ends up doing is the translation is you almost overwork or I put too much action into the bait because there isn't a lot of play in the tip to allow that bait to work in the correct manner. And I think that's something that we all get into. You know, we want to catch big fish, we want to land big fish, but sometimes we're overfishing a lure that we really need to put on a slightly lighter rod. Nothing crazy, like for example this, it's still a bait caster, it's just a medium action, a little bit softer than what you'd usually expect. I got my old Greeny Meanie on here. This is a Corrado 200E. Once again, I think it's like a 7.21. It's that upper mid-range kind of speed. And then on this guy, 90% of the time I'll have 12-pound tests, you know, dragging a shaky head, doing things along those lines. That 12-pound test is more than enough strength, but it's a little bit lower diameter, so I can make the presentation a little more finesse. You know, the line doesn't curl up as much. But 12-pound, you'd be surprised the size of fish and the amount of heavy cover you can actually fish with lighter line like that. You have to be a little bit more careful, but it provides you a very versatile option for some of your smaller baits that aren't going to cast as well and be presented as well on, say, like a medium heavy, a 7.2 kind of thing. So the last rod in the series that I'm going to show you is, I mentioned, you know, the majority of stuff that we do is on bait casting stuff. I love throwing a spinning rod. Like, I love Ned rigging, I love drop shotting, I love throwing light little tackle stuff. And there's a lot of fisheries that we get on where the pressure or even the size of bait sort of dictates the fact that we need to throw smaller or more finesse style lures, or maybe line diameter because water clarity is at play. So it's always important to have a finesse or a spinning rod around to make those presentations. And one of my favorites, you guys see it in a ton of videos, this is a 610 KS2 Elite, once again a Halo rod. Any sort of 610 to 7.1, 7.2, and I'd recommend medium action. A lot of guys are going to kind of get on me down in the comments probably and be like, dude, you need a medium light, you know. For certain specific situations you do, but keep in mind in this video we're trying to focus on kind of 3 rods that can do just about anything. The reason is, you know, you can go through like the crankbait like we talked about, like the chatterbait, and not get bites, or maybe like a day like today, the sun's out, the water's going to be pretty flat. You want something that's a little less disruptive because the fish are really seeing the bait well. They're seeing whatever you present well. So on this spinning rod, I can present something smaller. Great example, I got the little Kitech with a 1/4 ounce ball head on there. I can also present it on lighter line. So this is 8-pound fluorocarbon, and then I have 14-pound braid on there. I'll actually go down to even 10 or 12-pound braid. It gets a little less manageable for knot tying, as well as you get more wind knots with when you start using really, really light braid. So I like to stay kind of that mid-range. That 14 is very easy to tie. It's very manageable in the wind. It doesn't whip around as much. It doesn't spin up as much. So I stick with that 14, but you can go down a little bit lighter. But the versatility of a spinning rod, especially if you're bank fishing, I did a lot of bank fishing when I was in Florida before the videos even got started, making little skips like around corners, under trees, you know, flicking around a wacky rigged worm or something like that. Having just, you know, a softer presentation, that you have a lighter rod where you don't need to feel as much of a bite. You can feel those fish just kind of swimming around. Great example would be throwing a Senko or an Ace, a stick bait, weightless. You know, you can do it on a medium action bait caster, but I'll tell you what, you're going to notice a lot more bites and be able to put that bait in a lot tighter corners when it comes to skipping and just kind of flicking the bait around if you're doing it on a spinning rod. Also, I think you get better hookups on a presentation like that, on some of these smaller finesse presentations with that braid backing, because there is no stretch. You have that leader, 8-pound leader, so you're getting that finesse look. They're only seeing the leader line, but your sensitivity goes up exponentially because you're using that no stretch braid. So some of those very soft bites, those dead weight bites, are much easier to pick up on using that braid to fluorocarbon backing. But some other lures that you can do on this are techniques. Drop shotting, we mentioned Ned rigging, smaller shaky heads. One thing that actually I've been doing, we're in fall, a little 1/4 ounce spoon, a very small spoon to sort of mimic some of those bait fish. The other thing I like doing too is, you guys are going to see some videos throwing like a marabou style hair jig, very tiny hair jig. As we get into the colder periods of winter, some of these tiny baits actually catch some of your bigger fish, and really it's the only way to get bit. And having a rod where you can present that efficiently and where you can actually feel the bite, you're gonna have to go down to a spinning rod. But these are my 3 setups. Actually, real quick on this guy, this is the Daiwa, what is this guy, let's see, the Eliminator, I think it is. Yeah, the Daiwa Eliminator mid-range spinning reel. I think it's like 110 bucks on Tackle Warehouse. I'll put links to all this stuff at Tackle Warehouse. I really like this thing. I know a Shimano Stratic is the standard when it comes to spinning reels. This guy is not as smooth as a Stratic, I'll be the first to admit it, but you'd be amazed how smooth this drag is. Plus this reel is generally or designed as a saltwater reel, so the bearings are all sealed up in there. It's actually a very, well-built reel, a little bit heavier, there's no doubt about that, but you don't feel like it's as slippery as some of the you know, the plasticier reels that you get. Super smooth drag though, and I love the handle on there. But those are my 3 recommendations. If you guys got any personal recommendations to add, definitely drop them down in the comments box. I always love hearing your recommendations on rods and reels, because everyone has a specific action that they like. But I really think that these 3 style setups in general, they don't have to be these exact rods, they don't have to be these exact reels, but staying in that ballpark, you'd be amazed how many different baits and techniques that you can fish almost any time of the year with them, and you only need these 3 rods. I'm a crazy person. I love having 30 rods with me, but really in reality, when I go fishing somebody else's boat, I can't take that many. Or if I'm fishing off the bank, I can't take that many. So when I'm reducing and calling out my rods and reels, these are the guys that I go to. So make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. I'm gonna give Bog a pat for you. Think about fishing rods, think about fishing reels, and always be thinking about fishing. Tight lines.